Okay, imagine this. A country is fighting for its life, right? And then suddenly, bam, they're talking about maybe getting up to 150 cutting-edge fighter jets. But here's the kicker, the cash. It might literally be coming from funds seized from the very country they're fighting. I mean, that's not just a shockwave, that's like rewriting the rules of war finance on the fly. Welcome to the military point.
Yeah, that money angle is wild, but it's just one piece. You've also got the US and EU hitting Russia's oil income, like, simultaneously. And then, maybe the biggest surprise, is Kyiv suddenly talking differently about what peace could even look like.
So today we're diving into all that, the jets, this crazy new money idea, the diplomatic shifts. We're pulling it all together from the latest info. We really need to figure out what this funding thing means for, how conflicts might be fought going forward. Oh, and before we jump in, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We'd love to know.
Yeah, so our mission today is basically to cut through the static and see how these three things, the money, the military hardware, and the diplomacy are all connecting right now. It feels like a genuinely new phase.
Okay, let's start with the big military news. Potentially up to 150 Swedish Gripen jets for Ukraine. That number is huge, almost game-changing. Why Gripens, though? Especially when they're already expecting F-16s and those French Mirages.
Well, what's really interesting here, it's less about flash and more about practicality. The X-16 is great, no doubt, but it needs proper long runways, vulnerable air bases. The Gripen, particularly the E model, it was literally designed to operate from dispersed spots. Think like reinforced civilian roads.
Roads, seriously. So not just a tech upgrade, it's operational. It directly answers that big problem they have with missile strikes hitting their air bases. They could sort of hide them almost anywhere.
Precisely. Yeah, that's the core idea. And look, it's called a medium-weight fighter, but experts, they're saying the Gripen E is significantly more capable, much better than older models or, what Ukraine has now.
Yeah.
We're talking advanced radar, ESA radar,
Huh.
built-in electronic warfare systems,
Yeah.
and crucially, it can launch the Meteor air-to-air missile.
Okay, the Meteor. For listeners who aren't tracking every missile type, why is that one, the BVR one, so important?
Right, BVR, beyond visual range. So it's radar-guided, designed to hit targets way, way out there, long before you can see them. Giving Ukraine's pilots that BVR capability means they can take on incoming Russian jets much more safely from further away. It's a huge defensive and offensive boost.
Right. Now, the money, how do you even finance 150 jets? That's billions, surely. And this is where it gets, well, revolutionary. The plan involves using frozen Russian state assets, plus help from a, quote, coalition of the willing.
Yeah, revolutionary is the word. Until very, very recently, the idea was you couldn't touch the main pot of money, the principle for buying weapons. Legally tricky under international law.
So what changed? What's the legal difference between using the interest, which they were doing, and this new plan?
Okay, so before, they mostly agreed to use just the interest earned by those frozen assets. Still a lot of money, but, smaller and seen as legally safer. Now, the conversation's shifted. They're talking about using the actual value of the assets, the principal itself, maybe to back a massive loan for aid, or even, like with these jets, direct purchases. President Zelenskyy himself called it a priority, saying it's about money, about maneuvers.
The sheer nerve is kind of incredible. But, okay, let's ground this a bit. Even if the money magically appears next year, can Saab actually build 150 jets that fast? Sweden only ordered 60 Gripen S themselves, right?
Yeah, that's definitely the bottleneck. It suggests that 150 is probably more of a long-term goal, maybe a political target, than something realistic for, say, 2025. Saab is trying to increase production maybe to 20, 30 jets a year. Plus, they have that line in Brazil. But like the Swedish PM said, actually delivering that many, it's a long road ahead. It's complex stuff, high-end military gear. Okay, that context is key. But still, the idea of linking seized funds directly to weapon supply, that's a new precedent in wartime funding. Let's switch gears to the economic pressure. It feels like a coordinated squeeze happening right now.
It absolutely is. And if you connect the dots, the economic moves are meant to weaken Russia's ability to fund the war in the first place. Less need for the jets if the aggressor is starved for cash, right? And the US and EU did this together, which really boosts the impact.
The U.S. went straight for the jugular, didn't they?
Yeah.
Rosneft and Lukoil, Russia's two biggest oil companies, hitting the main cash cows.
Exactly. And then the EU dropped its 19th sanctions package. And this wasn't just symbolic, it looks pretty targeted. For instance, they moved up the ban on Russian liquefied natural gas, LNG imports, bumped it forward a whole year, so it starts early 2027 now.
And they went after that shadow fleet again. We heard over 100 more tankers got blacklisted. Remind us, what exactly is this shadow fleet? Right, the Shadow Fleet. It's basically this sprawling network of older tankers, often flying flags of convenience, operating outside Western insurance, Western rules. Moscow uses them to ship oil without sticking to that G7 price cap. So blacklisting another 100 plus, it just makes it harder, riskier, and more expensive for them to move their oil. It's like financial warfare via logistics.
Gotcha. And all this financial pressure, it loops back to supporting Ukraine, doesn't it? EU leaders talking about unwavering support,
Right.
backing that massive $140 billion loan.
Correct. That 140 billion, that's the big lifeline, and it's explicitly linked to the value of those frozen Russian assets. So it's not just aid anymore. It's like leveraged aid backed by the aggressor's own money.
Yeah.
It really does change the rules.
A revolutionary kind of collateral. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got massive financial backing, game-changing jets potentially on the way. The support seems solid. And yet, then you look at the diplomacy, and President Zelenskyy says something, well, pretty surprising.
Yet this is the part that makes you pause. Why the sudden change in how they're talking about negotiations? Zelenskyy apparently voiced support for an idea freezing the war along the current front lines,
Yeah.
something he supposedly discussed with Donald Trump, and he called it a good compromise.
Wait, a good compromise. Freezing the lines. That's a huge shift from demanding, the full 1991 borders back. It really shows the kind of pressure they must be under. But if they're getting all this new support, why signal compromise now?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Mhm.
Especially since the sources are very clear. Moscow immediately said, no way, they won't accept that kind of freeze. So if the deal's basically dead before it starts, why even mention it?
Has to be about signaling something else then.
Probably. Yeah, likely a strategic move. Maybe testing the waters internationally, especially with potential political changes coming in some allied countries. By saying he's open to a compromise, even one Moscow rejects, maybe Kyiv is trying to frame the narrative, show they're willing to talk, put the ball in Moscow's court. It just highlights how incredibly hard it is to find any kind of real off-ramp, even with all this military and financial aid pouring in.
Makes you wonder, yeah. What stands out to you listening to this about that shift, that willingness to even talk about freezing the lines? It really contrasts with the daily reality for people there.
And that reality, the human cost, is why all this aid is so critical. We talk about jets and billions, but we can't forget what's happening on the ground. The sources mention ongoing missile and drone attacks.
Yes, absolutely. We have to bring it back to that. Russian drones hit Kyiv again, second night in a row. Officials said fragments hit buildings, injured 4 people, and damaged a kindergarten.
A kindergarten. It's just grim. Targeting civilian places like schools, homes, it's psychological warfare as much as anything. And it wasn't just Kyiv. Elsewhere in Ukraine, 6 people were killed Tuesday night, including 2 children.
It just hammers home the urgency, doesn't it? Why defense systems like those Gripens are needed, why the money needs to flow fast. These aren't abstract policy moves. They're direct attempts to shield people from these awful, ongoing attacks.
So putting it all together, we're seeing rapid moves on really 3 connected fronts. First, this totally new way of funding weapons using frozen assets to back things like the Gripen deal. Second, a coordinated economic chokehold hitting Russia's oil money hard with sanctions on companies and that shadow fleet.
And third, this unexpected, maybe strategic diplomatic signal from Kyiv, showing some openness to a compromise, even one that Moscow rejects right now. It shows just how complex the whole situation is. Money, military power, diplomacy, everything's in flux, moving fast.
But that financial piece, the audacity of it, using frozen enemy assets to guarantee a $140 billion loan, potentially buying jets directly, that feels like a fundamental shift, a really radical change in how international finance works during wartime.
Which leaves us with a big question, a really important one for everyone thinking about the future. If this actually works, if they successfully use huge amounts of frozen enemy money to buy weapons directly, could this become the standard way allies are supported in future wars? I mean, the single deal funding these Gripens this way, it might just set the template for how wars are financed for decades. Something to really think about. You've been listening to The Military Point. Stay sharp, stay informed, and we'll catch you next time.